Hello and welcome to this telesummit on feminism as a sustainability tool. I'm Jenny Lamorgan. I'm a social entrepreneur and owner of greenwomanstore.com, where education is a priority for us, and we create educational tools like this telesummit on topics important to us as women. I'm excited to be here with our guest today and to bring you experts on the topic of feminism and sustainability. Feminism and sustainability are two collective quests that touch every aspect of our lives. Feminism has always brought hope, a lot of hard work, and truth to whatever issue it touches. We'll talk about the sustainability of feminism and the important role that feminism plays in real, lasting, and global sustainability. And now I'd like to introduce you to our guest. She is a vegan feminist intellectual, an author and activist who has pioneered work discussing and addressing domestic violence and harm to animals. Carol J. Adams is the author of The Sexual Politics of Meat, a feminist vegetarian critical theory. The 25th anniversary edition of this book will be available this fall in 2015. It has been translated into several languages. Carol is also the author of books on living as a vegan. Most recently, she wrote Never Too Late to Go Vegan, the Over 50 Guide to Adopting and Thriving on a Vegan Diet with Patty Breitman and Jenny Messina. She has also written Living Among Meat Eaters, the Vegetarian Survival Guide, and How to Eat Like a Vegetarian Even If You Never Want to Be One, which she co-authored with Patty Breitman also. Carol has also edited several collections of feminist writings about animals. The most recent is Ecofeminism, Feminist Intersections with Other Animals and the Earth, co-written with Lori Gruen. She has been a keynote speaker at conferences in the United States, Canada, Sweden, Britain, and Australia. Carol says, basically, for as long as I have been an adult, I have been an advocate, an activist, someone trying to figure out how do we transform this darn world that is built on inequality. So let's get started. Welcome, Carol Adams, and thank you very much for joining us in this discussion on feminism as a sustainability tool.
It's great to be with you, and thanks for being concerned about this issue and providing a forum such as this to have discussions and help educate people about the variety of ways of thinking on these issues.
And the connections,
yes.
Making these connections. I think it's something that feminism has always done, and certainly as we're making, as science itself is growing more into women's ways of thinking, the connections environmentally certainly are being made. So you wrote this book, The Sexual Politics of Meat, 25 years ago. What inspired your work and beginning in this area, and certainly your continued work?
Well, as long as I had consciousness, I was very aware of women's rights to be equal to men. I was raised by a feminist, and there were three sisters, and we all were treated with great encouragement and to have many dreams. When I was in college between 1968 and 1972, I became involved with the feminist movement, and so I traced the idea of feminist consciousness as a way of approaching and examining the world from 1970. I'd grown up with ponies. I grew up in a small village, very immersed in the natural world, and after college I went to Yale Divinity School. At the end of my first year there, I went home and I was unpacking when a neighbor knocked on the door and told me that someone had shot our pony. I ran outside to the pasture, and there was our pony Jimmy lying dead, and the other pony running around and neighing and already in mourning, pawing at the ground. That evening I went to eat a hamburger, and I stopped mid-bite. I thought, I'm eating a dead cow. I would not eat Jimmy, a dead pony, who's lying in the pasture waiting to be buried the next day. So why am I eating a dead cow? What's the difference between these dead animals? Is it that I knew one of them and I did not know the other? And I realized I was a hypocrite, that I had to stop eating animals. There's a feminist statement by a feminist philosopher, Sandra Bartke. She says, feminists do not see different things than other people. They see the same thing differently. In a sense, that's the process of feminist consciousness raising, to help us see what's normative as being oppressive. Examples of sort of insidious sexism. But that night, that feminist consciousness helped me realize that meat eating came from a dead animal who did not want to die. And I saw things differently. I saw the same thing differently. It was no longer hamburger. It was a dead cow. From that moment on, I decided I would become a vegetarian. And in the fall of 1974, as I was becoming a vegetarian, I was also taking many, many feminist courses in the Boston area. And one day I was walking down Massachusetts Avenue thinking about all the feminists from the past who had been vegetarian, and thinking about the novelists, feminist novels that used meat eating as a way of the woman character becoming aware of her own oppression, and thinking about feminist philosophy that emphasizes that the ends don't justify the means. The ends of enjoying meat, for instance, would not justify the means of violence. And suddenly I realized there was a connection between feminism and vegetarianism, and between meat eating and male dominance. And from that moment in 1974, I began to work first on a paper and then on a book, which was completed in '89. The minute the book appeared with just two images, an image of a woman cut up as though she were a piece of meat with the labels of ground and rump and all, and then another image with a pig who is posed as though she's a prostitute wanting to be consumed sexually. Just those two images in the book, suddenly my readers from around the world began to send me images. And once we had internet and emails, began sending me links to terrible ads. And I have a collection of photos and matchbook covers, menus, billboard advertisements that all reinforce this idea that there's a sexual politics of meat.
Wow, and you have to have
my readers, sorry, I was just going to say, my readers have made me continue to work on it in a sense, because they keep sending me these things, and I realize, oh, there's this aspect, there's that aspect. So it's sort of called forth that my feminist vegetarian or feminist vegan critical theory is always in process. There's always something more to interpret and understand.
And really gives you a global view of it all too, because it's very multicultural.
Yes, it's basically in the sexual politics of meat. I make three arguments: that meat eating has been a way of showing virility. Meat eating has been associated with virility and masculinity, and so it's something that men are expected to do, and that vegetables were in a sense disowned and equated with women. They're second-class food and second-class citizens. So that's the first point. The second point was that animals become what I called absent reference in meat eating. They disappear literally because they're killed. They disappear conceptually because we don't call it eating a dead cow, we call it eating a hamburger, or you don't call it eating a dead pig, you call it pork. So they've disappeared conceptually, and then they disappear metaphorically when their fate becomes a metaphor for someone else's experience. And third, that there's a connection between the views and representations and treatment of women and the representation and treatment of animals, that women in our culture are also absent reference, where we disappear as living beings and become representative of say, a sexy object to sell cars, or become objectified and then treated with violence through battering or rape. So in that moment of objectification, often what happens is that women are called pigs or sluts or bitch or something that has to do with an animal's a name we associate with animals, and that animals get feminized or sexualized in advertisements for meat to make it look like, oh, they want to be consumed. Now, which way do they want to be consumed?
Wow. And this is and the women are being animalized at the same time.
Correct. So, for instance, there'll often be photos. Well, women are more frequently shown nude than men, and nakedness is something that we associate with non-dominant beings. Dominant beings are clothed. Then they might be posed on all fours, which is an animal position, or shown ads showing women from the behind, all ways of animalizing them. So if I needed to have a sort of soundbite for sexual politics of meat, one of the soundbites would be that women are animalized and animals are sexualized and feminized. And in that sort of moment of intersection, what we have is the sexual politics of meat. So that there's this constant appeal to the male consumer to consume these consumable beings. And because of puns and double entendres and all, who that consumable being is sort of made slippery. Are they consuming a woman? Are they consuming a dead animal? For instance, a lot of barbecue ads will show a full-bodied female standing on two legs, kind of with a come-hither view. And here, what we know about barbecues is that dead pigs are being put over a pit, the full body of the dead pig, but they're made to look like they're women. And that's when I realized that some of these images, they're not advertisements so much as expressing attitudes, and the attitude is hate speech towards women. I mean, we already know that animals are disrespected if we're eating them. We don't care that they're living terrible lives and dying terrible deaths. But that the hate speech then layers onto this experience of a victimized animal, this view that women are consumable in that way too. And to me, that's hate speech. That's a condoning of violence through representation and language. For instance, a menu in Chicago that said double D cup breast of turkey sandwich. This sandwich is so big. And so, you know, this idea of who are they eating is pervasive. That's the thing about the sexual politics of meat. It's both pervasive, but so taken for granted, we generally don't register it when we see it in ads or in comments. Just recently, a South Carolina senator said that women were lesser grades of meat because they were taken from Adam's rib. So you've got these attitudes permeating our culture, and it's an attitude that underwrites violence.
Very much so. And do you see it increasing or decreasing? I mean, I think the way that young feminists are responding to a lot of these blatant comments and attacks are certainly lighter than the way that we used to respond. And they're amazing. You know, they're very effective. But I just, you know, it's really hard to get a handle on whether things are getting better or getting worse. You know?
Well, a couple things. I think many feminists respond to these ads that are misogynistic and say, don't compare us to animals. We aren't animals. But I want to say there's a reason they're comparing us to animals, and that's because in a patriarchal world, women are going to be associated with non-dominant beings like non-human animals, that oppression is connected. It's not enough for us to just say, well, we aren't animals. We need to be saying the way we're treating animals establishes a sort of basic foundation for then moving women further from men in terms of being seen as human and closer to animals, that as long as we're treating some beings like this, women are in vulnerable positions. So I would take an analysis of any ad or statement where women are equated with animals or with meat and say it's not enough to say we aren't. We need to look at why they're saying that, and they're saying it because of this interlocking absent referent where women and animals are positioned in the same way culturally by our dominant culture. Now, whether it's gotten better or worse, certainly since 1990, veganism has become a word that people know, and vegan products are more widely available. But at the same time, a sort of regressive reassertion of masculinity and meat eating has come about. For instance, Red Lion Beer, not even a meat company, did an ad last year putting together a barbecue, 386 man points, cooking tofu on it, minus 417 man points. Now, it's all a joke, but it's as though it's saying tofu and the veganism it represents is so potent in its attack on this dominant view of meat eating and masculinity that all you have to do is put some tofu on a barbecue grill and you have completely lost your man points. I mean, what it's saying is that masculinity and meat eating are unstable yet normative, that it can be undone. It's kind of like some of the other ads that I've seen. Renew your man card by eating meat. I don't have to renew my library card. I'm a library user for years with one library card. Why is the man card so unstable it has to be renewed every day? So to me, that says that there's been movement in 25 years, that the association I saw in the 80s has been threatened, and so it's articulated at a more anxious level or a more over-the-top level. Of course, there's some irony going on there, but the irony is just, the ironic pose is just a way of positioning the ad so that we can be saying, oh, no, they're not really serious. Oh, but yes, they are. They want you, especially men, to see meat as the most important food to be consumed.
Wow. Wow. And all of the images that you're exposing yourself to doing this work, you've got to have something to balance that with, you know, the stories, the other side of the picture where veganism is growing and more people are becoming more aware. You know, you've got to have those stories to replenish yourself and heal your heart.
I think the thing that replenishes me, besides hearing from people who get it and send on these images so that I know that people are responding to the images with resistance, is eating vegan food. A couple weeks ago, as I was completing the afterword to the 25th anniversary edition, I was reading about the treatment of pigs. Sows are kept in gestation crates, sometimes for 2.5 years. Then they're in a gestation crate, and then they're moved to a farrowing crate for when they give birth. But they're never allowed to stretch or move around. And I'd been sent by Nathan Runkle of Mercy for Animals this picture of a sow in a gestation crate, and it above her number was this note that someone had writ, selfish old bitch. And I thought, here is this poor animal who can't even move. But our sexist language has been appropriated and applied to her I mean, maybe they had a hard time getting her to move. Maybe she wanted to move, and she could not. And yet they labeled her selfish old bitch, fat selfish bitch. I guess it was fat selfish bitch. Mm-hmm. So I was reading a new book that is out about the treatment of pigs on the slaughter line. And it's just heartbreaking because to get these animals to move, these female animals, they're often anally raped or in other ways harshly treated, violently treated, so that they have the worst of both worlds. They're living in sexual slavery, in a sense, reproductive slavery, and then they're still killed. And I was so upset after reading that. I had to walk away and sort of play with our rescue dogs and make myself something vegan that rooted me back, that my way of eating is a boycott of all of that. Mm-hmm. People think veganism is a privilege. Veganism is a boycott. It's a boycott of a system that is inherently cruel and has added cruelty upon cruelty to the inherent cruelty. It's also a boycott, I know we'll get to this, of a terribly inefficient environmental choice of consuming dead animals. But before we go there, let me also speak about cows, because the other thing that I find that just breaks my heart is the situation of cows. Cows and chickens who produce milk and eggs. I coined a term for that in Sexual Politics of Meat. Back in the 19th century, vegetarians called meat animalized protein. The idea there was that the protein pre-exists the animal. The protein's in the vegetables and the greenery they're eating. Protein is plant protein. And the animals animalize it, and you end up with animalized protein. But I realized we needed a name for what happens for cows and chickens and goats when goat milk is made. And so I coined the term feminized protein. It's to recognize that cheese and eggs, yogurt, all these things that people just say they can't live without, is coming at the price of animals who are kept captive, and again in this reproductive slavery, where their reproductive functions are subsumed to the pleasures of human beings. And the way cows live, they can't be producing milk if they're not pregnant. So they're both pregnant and lactating for 9 out of 12 months of the year. Once they give birth, their calves are taken away from them within 24 hours. And cows actually moo and lament when their babies are taken from them. But it's the only way to continue this milk supply to humans. And then, of course, the baby cows either become veal calves, and that's why it's said, they're in every glass of milk there's a slice of veal, or they become caught within this reproductive cycle. Mm-hmm. And reading about that just always breaks my heart. But we need to know this. It's okay to have our hearts broken. It endows us with the capacity to respond. So many people say, I don't want to know this, which says to me they already know something because they don't want to know what they already know. And I say to them, you think grief will kill you. Grief is not going to kill you. Grief is going to equip you to live in this world. This is a grievable world at this point. Without some grief to help us recognize what we've done to this planet and to the other animals, we are left in a sort of placid lie to protect our privilege and our pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great deal of denial goes into our everyday lives, I think, certainly.
And I
like
people,
that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I like that you're saying that grief is empowering.
It is, because course, it has to be balanced. I balance the grief of my knowledge, again, with this notion that veganism is a boycott, and I'm getting delicious food. So if I go and make a beautiful stew on a cold day when I've just read about the animals again, I'm finding balance. But not to grieve, not to open my heart, would deprive me of living a connected world. And that's something that feminism has had at its heart, is recognizing connections and refusing to settle for lies and normalization of what is oppression. So feminism taught me how to find connections. And when we open our heart to say, I am strong enough to learn this, we find that we are engaged in a wonderful world of other people working for social justice. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to say about the sexual politics of meat is that that is an aspect of social injustice. And we as feminists have to recognize that aspect of social injustice as much as we recognize sexual harassment and job discrimination and the loss of women's sense of being able to give birth with midwives. All of the feminist issues that we know, how we're treating the other animals is a feminist issue.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Very much. And what you said about meeting other activists, I think being a vegetarian, no matter where you're traveling in the world or in your own communities, you're going to meet, again, activist-minded folks, in your vegetarian pursuits. Certainly a whole nother world of people that you're otherwise not exposed to.
Yes, and they're going to teach you all wonderful ways of cooking. I have learned so much. I've been so lucky as the author of The Sexual Politics of Meat. I always end up talking about recipes when I speak on a campus or in a new community, and come back with all these wonderful new recipes. Vegan cuisine is evolving so quickly. We've got wonderful plant-based milks, and we can make our own. Mm-hmm. We can make our own plant-based cheeses. Every once in a while I'll make a pizza just for the fun of it. The salads we can make, it's the main dishes, the risottos. It's not that we're closing a door on wonderful eating. We're closing a door on evil. It's truly evil how animals are treated alive and then in the killing. And I find it liberating to know that I am not part of that I'm trying so hard not to be part of that evil.
Well, and helping others. And I do think that the recipes are a big piece of it. I am in and out of veganism or vegetarianism, and it's partly due to the recipes and the having time to learn how to cook differently and all of that. I'm really interested in the new book that you've written about It's Never Too Late to Be Vegan, because you do deal with the recipes in there, and that's on my books to buy list.
Well, I think basically one of the things we say is look at what foods you're already eating that are vegan or could be vegan. Marinara sauce on pasta. I think the other thing is to learn that with some cashews and water that you've soaked, you empty out the water, you use some new water, and you blend it, you are going to have the equivalent of a fettuccine sauce, a cream sauce. I mean, just knowing a few things makes the movement through veganism easy. We're not giving up everything. We're just finding new ways of doing some things. So we give advice saying, well, try being vegan whenever you go out, or try being vegan only when you go out. Try being vegan once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. Try being vegan for 2 weeks and see how you feel. Most people cook only 10 recipes. There's 10 basic recipes that most households follow. Develop 10 recipes that are vegan and see what you can do. Learn a basic vegetarian soup. And, I mean, at this point, you can even have grilled cheese sandwiches made out of plant-based cheese, and they're delicious. So I often tell people, you think you're afraid to change, but you're actually using up more energy not changing. You're, instead of thinking, I can't do it, think, I could do it. How could I do it? And I also find, I often hear from people, I could never give up cheese. But I want them to think about what that says, that my pleasure, my need is so deep, I am willing for a cow to go through this terrible life on my behalf. And to rethink that, because what it does is it kind of proclaims a selfishness. There's a feminist theory developed in the 80s, a feminist ethic of care. And the theory that was proposed by Carol Gilligan, was that women are often more embedded in relationships. We make ethical decisions based on relationships. And now we know even that this notion that we're autonomous people is false. We grow in relationships. How do we learn to write or read or talk or walk? That's all through relationships. And what we've done, feminist vegans, is we say these relationships don't stop at the border of the human species. These relationships extend. And being able to embed ourselves within this recognition of multiple relationships beyond the sort of human hierarchy gives us great gifts. So look for the gifts. The gifts of realizing you can toast some hemp seeds with a little lemon juice and you've got like a Parmesan. Or that, I think people say, I could be a vegan if you cooked for me. Well, learn to cook. Give yourself that gift. We are so immersed in this technological world where people are reading their iPhones every moment or iPads. Walking away from that and finding the rhythm of cooking, of slicing, of eating a quiet meal of that's rich in plant foods. These are new joys that are available to anyone.
Now, when you talk about the vegan diet being nutritious, and it is, and it's also the most economical, so that really touches on two areas. We're all watching our budgets and trying to cut down on our need for doctors, and that's such a huge part of our budgets, and certainly our food is as well. Advocating for a vegan diet, I think, is such a big piece of not only our personal budgets, but our national budget as well. I mean, we're drowning with all of these healthcare issues. So, can you talk about the nutritious part of being a vegan? I know there's folks who have health problems or physical weakness, and they feel that they can't be a vegan or a vegetarian because they need the animal protein. So, can you speak to the nutrition part of the vegan diet?
Well, I think that there's been such a misconception, and I think it's part of the sexual politics of meat, that there's only one good protein, and it's animal protein. But it's not true. You can get all your protein needs from plant-based foods. In our country, no one's dying of lack of protein, but they're dying from arteriosclerosis, which is caused, by a high-fat diet. They're dying from heart attacks. They're dying from cancer. 6 out of 10 of the leading diseases known, that Americans get are associated with what's called the standard American diet, the SAD diet. When people get animal protein, they're not just getting animal protein, they're getting a lot of fat as well. There's no cholesterol in a vegan diet. So you're automatically eliminating foods that aren't good for you, but if you add kale and leafy green vegetables and carrots, and you're actually eating foods that are good for you. In Never Too Late to Go Vegan, we provide several charts to help people see where they're getting their nutrition. But this notion that people need animal protein, it's just false. I mean, so many people still say to vegans, well, where do you get your protein? And vegans have started saying back, where are you getting your fiber? Colon cancer is due to not having enough fiber going through your body. Meat moves through the intestines so slowly, it's breaking down, and its poisons are sitting in the colon for this long period of time. And so we've got high incidences of colon cancer as a result. So basically, one way to think about all this is that the best way to measure the cost of a diet is to combine your food budget with your healthcare budget, because so many diseases are associated with nutrition. So that's one way to think of it. The other thing is to, if anybody lives near Whole Foods, the interesting thing is Whole Foods is now posting how good is this on this scale, and it's telling you what's nutritious. Just walk in among the vegetable area and see these foods, way off the chart because they're so good for you.
Wow.
Eat oatmeal. Again, we have to remember that fast food chains need people to be consuming their food. And that's a lot of the advertisements. Look at these advertisements now. A McDonald's breakfast that has egg and bacon and something else. There's no fiber. You're eating this heavily fat food first thing in the morning. Try some oatmeal.
And and from a health perspective, what is particularly wrong with dairy?
Well, dairy, I think the worst thing about dairy is it's bad for our moral health. And many vegans encourage people to give up dairy before they give up meat, because you are really eating the suffering of cows and their offspring. Lots of cows get mastitis because they're so swollen with milk. So there's the USDA allows a little pus in all milk. People are eating milk from sick animals who've been terribly mistreated. So our moral health is one thing that I feel is important for us to underline. But dairy is, again, very high in fat. The kind of protein you're getting, you could be getting from plants. And there are lots of charts where you can compare protein sources and see how strong the protein and calcium in plant-based foods is. So, I mean, many women have been encouraged to drink dairy to stop osteoporosis. But I saw a recent study that was linking dairy to osteoporosis. Think about our mothers. Our mothers followed the basic food groups, 4 basic food groups. Dairy was one, meat was the other. Think of how many broken bones our elder women relatives have suffered. How much osteoporosis there was. The standard American diet did not protect them from osteoporosis. So there's the issue of fat, the issue of not being a good source of calcium, the issue of what's in your milk. And lastly, the issue that we have taken this from a suffering animal.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I know I've been aware of the lack of calcium certainly in the pasteurized, homogenized milks. It's not anything what we think it is, what the advertisements say. Can you speak to the need for the B vitamins in a vegan diet?
There's been a great deal of discussion, especially about B12. And some people argue that B12 is found in tempeh and some other plant foods. But whenever I meet someone who says, I read your book and I became a vegan, I say to them, be sure to take vitamin B12. Why take the chance of not having enough B12? B12, the way they think people in the past got B12 was that our food wasn't so clean, so that when we had lettuce or some vegetable, you were also getting some dirt. But rather than eating dirty carrots, I take my B12.
Well, dirty carrots aren't all bad either. I don't always wash them. Get them at the farmers markets, and they have a little bit of dirt on them, and that's all right.
I think one of the most exciting foods for people to get to know is nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast can be sprinkled on popcorn, and nutritional yeast tastes like cheese, but it's also just great for you. It's filled with B vitamins. And so nutritional yeast with a little soy milk or almond milk can make a cheesy sauce. Nutritional yeast with a little coconut oil and some other flavors made a cheese ball that I made. Nutritional yeast scattered on top of some pita bread with a little garlic and then broiled will just taste wonderful. So I'd encourage people to get to know nutritional yeast.
Nutritionally, and on salads and on pastas, on everything.
Right, right.
Popcorn is the favorite.
I think the other thing for people to think about when they think about these issues of the sexual politics of meat is that because animals are absent reference, because they disappear conceptually from our thoughts when we talk about meat eating, we lose the sight that before an animal can be made into meat violently, they've had to eat and they've had to shit. And they produce a huge amount of fecal waste. And that fecal waste accumulates and pollutes water and has to be removed. The amount of fecal waste from cows is just immense. In addition, cows, as they digest, release gases and contribute to the destruction of the ozone layer. The amount of water that goes into producing a piece of meat is huge because the animals have to be watered. There's water that's used to clean up. California's in a drought, and yet how much animal agriculture is going on there and usurping the water. It is thought that at least 35% of our dependence on foreign oil is related to animal agriculture. So in terms of effects on the planet, meat eating is considered one of the biggest culprits. The United Nations has recommended moving towards a vegan diet. That was 5 years ago. The USDA is now recommending moving away from a meat diet. All of the climate change that's affected by this dependence on a meat diet, one of the things we know is it creates instability. The water rising, the tsunamis that come through, the fragility of some ecosystems because of the changing of the through climate change, so that now we know that there's actually a threat to security from climate change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some of this is reversible if we stopped eating animals.
It's incredible.
The environmental impact of eating animals is immense.
Mm-hmm.
And over again, I mean, it's announced that becoming a vegan has greater impact on saving the environment than driving a Prius or eating local. Over and over again, these studies are released. It's not even debated except among extreme non-science following people that these connections exist.
Yeah, I've heard that the methane gas produced by the cattle is the biggest climate change polluter.
Yes. Well,
so,
I think there was. I think at one point I read it was 18%.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely going to make a big leap, and I think that the younger generations are certainly making steps in this direction. Certainly in my own family, and I think, do you find that the younger generations are increasingly moving toward vegetarianism and veganism?
I think some are. I don't know that it's definitive. I've certainly met some wonderful, wonderful feminist vegans around the country at college and younger. So some are getting it, but I also get tweets from people who say, I'm a feminist and I'd never give up dairy. I just looked up that 40% of fresh water used in the U.S. in 2000 went to irrigate feed crops for livestock.
Yeah, right.
40% of fresh water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
40 calories of fossil fuel are needed to produce 1 calorie of protein from feedlot beef. But only 2 calories of fossil fuel are needed to produce 1 calorie of protein from tofu. And then we're also losing topsoil. So we've got losses. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say, we don't eat just cattle from the U.S. We eat cattle from South America, and other parts of the world, and lands that are taken from indigenous peoples are just destroyed. They're not usable for agriculture again because the cattle pack the ground so intensely. So we're spreading.
One third of the land mass of this world is devoted to animal agriculture. 1/3.
Wow.
So this is why I call veganism a boycott. It's not just a boycott of cruelty. It's a boycott that's envisioning a better way of living in this world. Better use of our land, certainly. Yeah.
Better use of wind energy, solar, whatever. It certainly have better use for 1/3 of our land mass. Well, Carol, we're getting toward the end of our interview. Are you optimistic for the future, for the direction that we're moving in, and for women's lives in particular?
I think I am always optimistic despite any evidence to the contrary, because we have changed the world in so many ways. We just haven't changed it enough. But we do know how to change. We know how to change ourselves as feminists, and we do know how to help create change and social justice. It's just making sure those tools that we've developed over the past 45 years, since the second wave feminism, that those tools are more widely used. I am always optimistic because I don't want to be jaded. And I don't want to give up. I've met people who are very, very pessimistic about the fate of the earth because of the conditions we as humans have created for it. And they don't want to have children. They don't want to bring anybody else into this world. They're very fatalistic. I would like to say every day we wake up with a choice. And the choice of lessening our footstep on this earth and increasing kindness is one we're given every day. And it's a form of liberation and renewal. And the more of us who do it, the more the optimism can spread. We have it in our power to change. When feminists coined personal is political, it meant that within our personal choices, we are having a political impact. So let's make those personal choices be political. Be the kind of actions that represent a vision of feminism. And that vision of feminism for me is extending care, caring beyond the human family, working for justice, and recognizing that injustice is something that can be happening to those who are not deemed human. That when we burden our measurement of justice by whether someone is human or not, we are participating in oppression. Because in the past, slavery was used against humans who were seen as not human. We must liberate our view of ourselves and see ourselves as embedded within a world that is so much wider than that of just human beings, and that we're responsible to the whole entire world, and that we can have fun creating vegan meals and being part of a feminist collective resistance in these recognitions.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much, Carol, for igniting our feminism, certainly, and enlightening us toward a vegan dietary choices. And thank you for speaking with us and for all your good works. I just wanted to get a little bit in about your love of writing on Jane Austen.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm sure there's others who would like to know about that. So.
Well, I came to Jane Austen late in my life, in my 50s, just 10 years ago, and it was during a time when I was helping to caregive for 3 elderly people, my parents and my partner's mother. And I just found that Jane Austen was the sustenance my spirit needed as I went through extremely demanding times over an 8-year period. And that's what I'm working on now, is a memoir of how Jane Austen kind of kept me sane or kept me going.
Very good.
Just a remarkable author she is.
All right. Thank you again very much.
Thank
Carol.
you for caring about these issues and for your wonderful questions and for what you're doing.
Thank you. And you can find out more about Carol's work on her website, caroljadams.com. And there's a website with all 3 authors of Never Too Late to Go Vegan, the Over 50 Guide to Adopting and Thriving on a Plant-Based Diet. And the website is nevertoolate2govegan.com. And they say, what could be wiser than choosing compassion, vibrant health, and a vast, delicious cuisine to be the guiding principles in your life. And you can follow Carol on her blog by going to caroljadams.blogspot.com, where she blogs about life as she sees it as a feminist vegan. And this includes her critiquing images that proliferate in our culture that depict still the sexual politics of meat. She also provides great vegan recipes and reflects on caregiving, and when the spirit moves her, she celebrates all things Jane Austen. And we have 3 of Carol's books on greenwomanstore.com. We have The Sexual Politics of Meat, Ecofeminism, and Never Too Late to Go Vegan. So thank you very, very much, Carol. J. Adams, and thank you for listening in. We hope we have informed and inspired you in many ways, and we hope you will try to catch more of the interviews in this series on feminism and sustainability, as well as our other podcast series on preventing cancer, women and money, and leaning into green, issues important to us as women. And please share the interviews with your family and friends. You never know who you may be inspiring. And no matter what your description or experience of feminism is, we hope to have heightened your understanding of feminism's important role in all aspects of sustainability and restored and strengthened your resolve to build alliances for the future. For it is clear that none of us are really alone. Keep listening, and bye for now.